All right, we're rolling. All right, so we've been working on some new turbos for the Can MX3 platform. And we've been like focusing really heavy on making the packages really simple. So, you know, like the best bang for the buck on top of the quickest installs and everything else, because some of these packages can get pretty involved, not just from a money standpoint, but from a complexity standpoint. So from like a stock appearing, like we would prefer to call this like stock appearing turbos. Stuff that basically looks stock, bolts on like a stock machine. Everything about them is from an appearance standpoint stock. This is a stock turbo here from the 24 base model. So they've, I would say the horsepower bump in the new models is ECU based on top of it being an RR turbo. So the RR uses a little bit larger turbo than the old base models and the old turbo Rs. So the stock turbo, if we're gonna go based on measurements, is a 36.8 inlet by 49 millimeter exducer. So that's the big part of the wheel. On this machine, on e85, this turbo made 250. So the green has been our like go-to upgrade, which traditionally, like on a base model, the turbo's a little smaller, so it only make, I want to say maybe 235, I think is what the package was. 235, 240. The green package is the 260 kit. So 260 to 265 is pretty normal for green. This compressor, which you can clearly see is bigger, measures at 40.2 on the inducer, 55.5 on the exducer. But as you can see, the turbine wheels are basically the same. So from a spool standpoint, these turbos would light up very similar, almost unnoticeable in how they would light up, because the turbine wheels are the same. So the first turbo I wanted to try is, we're going to call this the S1 or stage 1. We wanted to attack the turbine wheel. So we've noticed that the turbine side is huge for power, especially on pump gas. So this compressor is a 39.6 millimeter inducer and a 58.2 millimeter exducer. So slightly smaller inducer, but a bigger exducer. This turbo made 288, 290, and this is a slide-in turbo. So you literally would take your exhaust manifold still mounted to the engine, you unbolt this clamp, you slide out the factory turbo, you slide in the new turbo, so it doesn't even require a different exhaust manifold, and you basically drop in horsepower. That was like the main goal. So this turbo, 290 horsepower potential. And then we have like a modified exhaust manifold turbo, which is the S2. So the S2 is a 42.5 millimeter inducer with a 60 millimeter exducer. And you can see the turbine wheel is quite a bit bigger. I mean, it's actually slightly bigger than the heat shield. There's the S1 turbine, S2 turbine, and green turbine. So yeah, the turbo spool slightly slower the bigger they get, right? But we want them to still be make great power potential. I wouldn't say they're like super laggy by any means. These turbos light up pretty quick. But staying within the stock frame, and we're getting pretty close. There's going to be, we have an S3 coming, which is more 45 millimeter turbo. And you can see we're basically at the limit of where we can machine this thing and get that wheel to fit. What we also did in the like the S lineup of turbos. So we'll have the S1, S2, S3, is we made the inlet to the turbo bigger. So from like stock, green, these will, you could just use the factory inlet tube. We always recommend a 2020 airbox if you have an older model. But you could see like when we go to the pure, much larger. So we'll have a coupler to adapt to the factory airbox that's coming for this. And the S2 is the same thing. S3 will be the same thing as well. So everything else is the same. Stock wastegate will bolt on. So for S1s, if you have an RR, you basically just take off the factory gate and the bracketry and slide it onto this turbo, set the crack pressure to like 14 PSI for E85, and you're ready to roll. So on top of us just telling you about these turbos, a lot of places are just posting like 18% airflow increase or this compressor wheel, and they don't really post like the results. So yeah, like obviously we can make a bigger turbo, but we don't know what it's going to actually do. So we will have results for stock to green to S1 to S2. We've done all the dynoing. This package is about to release. The inlet tube is the one thing that we really want to get dialed in for the S1s, so that you can bolt them onto a 2020 airbox and like be ready to roll. So we've done all the testing on the stock ECU MG1 24 base model. So I can post up, I'm going to bring up some dyno sheets here so you can see every pole. So stock all the way to S2. These turbos here, the green up, these are going to be in like the 28, 29 pounds of boost range. The stock turbo is going to be more in like the 26 range, 27 range. It just depends on the day. But this turbo will max out earlier. These turbos can make more boost, but these turbos, because of the bigger turbine wheel and the like assist in turbine flow, the boost pressure is about the same as the green. It just makes more power because it can move more exhaust. So I'm gonna pull up some graphs here and we'll talk about those.
All right, we're rolling? All right. We are testing some more stuff on our base model and extremely impressed with how things are going. This is now in an E85 format. We have the Turbo RR fuel pump, our big injectors. You've seen in our previous video that we had like our charge tube. We modded the intake up a little bit, got our bed delete on here. This is our new full exhaust side exit style. Works better with the bed delete to kind of have the exhaust pump out the side. We're working on one with that's going to be like a center exit. But other than that, this thing's E85 right now. But other than that, yeah, that's basically it. Like, got a new blow-off valve on it, made in-house in the USA. Check that thing out. Kind of a prototype. Got the ghost on there. We've had issues. We've just had, I guess, a need for a certain blow-off valve that seals many ways. So this one actually has an O-ring that seals the boost on the top of the hat from entering the port, and there's an O-ring on the bottom that seals the piston from exiting out the port. So it's a twin O-ring style setup, and we're kind of fine-tuning the spring that would go in here for like stock machines with stock cams. But other than that, this thing, it sounds pretty sweet. It's working really good. It's still stock turbo. So I honestly haven't even pulled the turbo off to measure this thing, but the amount of power it's making, it has to be an RR style turbo. Like, it's making 249, the pull before that was 249.7, so basically 250 horsepower on just the E85 stock turbo wastegate injector, like our big injector kit. So we're gonna do a quick little video of a pull. Oh yeah, we also got Chris's clutch on here. So that's the KWI Ultra Shift floated secondary with DR3. and single spring. So this is the newest configuration from him that uses like a Pro R style weight. So we're running 3 arms in there, and they're pretty filled up. I think the tips might not have anything in it, but everything else is filled up, the mid and heel. It has like a moderately low engagement, so we can use that 2300 RPM launch control. But that was the other thing we added. We kind of got rid of the P drive. Not saying the P drive wasn't working. It's just as we go up in power, we might as well start tuning this clutch. So, but yeah, other than that, we'll make some pulls and see how this thing goes. So we have a baseline test of this machine. So it baseline at like 142. So we've seen these, it just depends on the day. Like if it's 100 degrees out, they're not going to dyno great. But if you dyno them in cool weather without the intercooler, they'll do pretty good. So yellow line is stock, 142 horsepower. The blue line is stock turbo e85. So 251, which is honestly amazing. Stock turbos on RRs with the slightly lower compression, they like 242, 245, something like that. But with the base model engine, slight bump in compression, they make a little bit more power. So, which is awesome. That's what we want to see. So, 251 on the stock turbo on e85, and then the traditional 260, 265 is just one of the poles here. So you would see about a 15 bump horsepower in the green, almost identical like power delivery curves. And then the green is that stage 1, which honestly has almost identical curve. I started at slightly more power. You can see here, they touched here, which is slightly slower to build power, and then the turbo actually did light up and it beat it out. So it kind of beat out all those other poles. So 287 on this pole, on the S1, which is pretty dang good. This has the Ghost. So the Ghost was like, I don't know, 7 horsepower gain or something like that. So it's slightly skewed with our intake manifold on there. That does help light stuff up and make more power. But then the S2, I did start at a little bit less power, and you could see it is a little laggier. You know, it's about 5 miles an hour laggier in terms of like spool up, but the power potential up top is there, right? So we picked up quite a bit of power up top with it. If you look at 50 to 70 miles an hour, which this is about 60 miles an hour here, you know, it's making 311
and the S1 is 274, so 25, 35, 36 horsepower bump on the S2. And then full shift, the clutch, what happens out past 75, 77 is mostly just the clutch hitting full shift. So, what we tend to want to look at what happens below 70. That's like our main goal. After 70, clutching and all that other stuff can help make it a little bit better. But from a power standpoint, we're trying to look at like what's over here. So you can see the slight loss in power and spool up with that big turbine wheel. It's still stock appearing. This is still great. What I'm going to pull up next is the club turbo, which has been our like 300 horsepower package. I'll pull up the club versus the S2 and we'll take a comparo of those. But you can see the S1 is really a killer combination. And that package is really simple. It's almost identical to the FP Green, obviously minus the turbo and then the inlet to the turbo. So we could sell this package now if you want to run like an aftermarket intake, and then we'll have that coupler for the like factory airbox. So let me work on pulling up some different graphs here. All right, so club package versus the S2s. So these two poles, we're actually starting at quite a bit more power. So it isn't like an amazing comparo. But what you can see is we're starting at probably, so when I say we're starting at more power, it just means that the turbo's already lit up a little bit more, right? So like if you look at, we're starting at 42 horsepower on these poles, and these ones, 17 and 24 is basically where we're starting at. So how quickly can they converge and actually get close to each other? So the club is this yellow line, and the blue is that S2. So you can see the club actually is slightly lazier, so the club turbo has more of an S1 compressor wheel, but a bigger turbine wheel than the S2. So we could see it having a little bit harder time like lighting up and really destroying the S2 in this pole. But they kind of get there at not too far apart, maybe 3-4 miles an hour. So the S2 I'd say is going to be the club replacement. I think from a simplicity standpoint, not having that exhaust manifold and that other connection point for a possible leak, like our exhaust manifold plus a turbo bolted to it, and then we have an adapter to adapt it to the stock flange so you can use like a stock exhaust on it. Where this setup here will be less money, and it just bolts directly to the cylinder head, so we only have one gasket to cylinder head, and then we have the one exhaust mount where the factory turbo will bolt right up just like stock. So this is an e85 pole, and then these green and reds are pump gas 93. So the S2 with the Ghost on 93 made 261 peak, and then the club on this particular pole, it obviously did beat it to lighting up because it's making more power, but when they actually achieve peak, it's pretty similar. So, and they actually like lay right over each other at the end. So the S2 just kind of comes in a little bit harder a little bit later, and then they just lay right on top of each other. So from a tune standpoint and a power production standpoint, these turbos are really close. These packages are really close to each other. But the S2 is just going to be cheaper, and it's just simpler. Like it's easier to bolt on. So that's going to be, you're going to see that transition happening here really soon, and then we'll post results. So the club package in the green and everything has been like 3-bar map sensor, 1050cc injector, which these new base models basically come with the 3-bar map sensor stock, so you don't have to buy any map sensors. The base models would require a fuel pump upgrade in terms of it would need an RR style fuel pump. And if you're running if you're running any of these bigger turbos, you'll also need to install our big pump upgrade with a rewire kit. So if you have an RR, the only thing you're gonna have to do is slide the factory pump out and put our pump upgrade. The housing is the same. But on the base models, you're gonna have to replace the housing as well. So the housing will be upgraded and the pump will be upgraded. The stage 3 is gonna be 4-bar map sensor, 1300cc injector with our fuel pressure modification. So it's all the same upgrades, the pump and the housing on a base model. It's just we also increase the fuel pressure because the boost pressure goes up quite a bit higher on those packages. So we'll list it all out. I just want to like mention it so people understand of, like what needs to happen on these newer machines. We were gonna offer this 42 in a 1300 4-bar option, but I mean 311 horsepower with such a simple kit. We might be able to push it a little bit further, but I think that's going to be reserved for the S3. Like if you use this turbo at higher elevation or in the summertime or whatever, the turbo is definitely going to be pushed, pretty hard. So those are results that talked about all our new turbos and kind of where we're at on this package. So we're at 311. Obviously, this is a part of our like YouTube series on making more power with this kit, with this car. So we'll try that S3 turbo. I hope to get in that 350 range with that turbo. And then it'll eventually evolve into one of our bigger turbo packages with the actual exhaust manifold, which I think we're gonna pick the Zona 43. We'll see. That should make 400 on this package. Completely stock engine. I mean, it's got 25 miles on it maybe, so it's got factory oil, factory head studs. We're not going to change any of that. If we pop a head gasket, we'll go on video replacing it, but I think we'll be fine pushing these engines up there. So check the website and keep watching as we increase some power on this thing.